Unit 10, page 2. Aim. How is reproduction important to evolution? So the objectives in this lesson are to describe how reproduction is related to the transfer of genes to offspring, as well as to explain what favorable adaptations are. We'll start with two questions. On your handout, you'll see question 1, what are the two types of reproduction? Hopefully you remember sexual and asexual reproduction are the two types. Question 2, why is variation important to evolution? We should remember that variation means a variety. So the more variety there is, there's a greater chance of success. It's possible that one variation could be really beneficial to the organism, whereas another might be really negative. Variation. Characteristics or traits are caused by different genes. There might be genes for blue eyes as well as for brown eyes. These are variations. Sexual reproduction increases these differences or variations through something called recombination of genes or crossing over. Remember, crossing over, as pictured on the right, is when chromosomes literally cross and exchange material. Notice that the final chromosomes on the right have a mix of the original. This happens during meiosis to create gametes. Mutations or changes in DNA also can increase variation. Remember, anytime the DNA changes, that organism, whatever offspring it has, might also be affected, depending on where the mutation occurs. We also have things like environmental pressures. So the environment is just defined by our surroundings. And there's things in the environment that are natural, like water, sunlight, other animals, plants, climate, food. And there's also things that are man-made or influenced, things like deforestation, building factories, driving cars, producing chemicals. All of these are environmental pressures. Reproductive success helps us figure out which genes are going to be best in that environment. Remember, when an offspring reproduces, it will have genes from its parents. And if those genes are well adapted to the environment, that offspring will survive and hopefully have a chance to reproduce in its lifetime and pass those genes on further. Remember that natural selection is when the environment determines which traits are best fit, and the organisms that are most fit are going to have the greatest reproductive success, so they're going to have more babies. Also, different genes for different environments. So we see different organisms here, and we also talked about this in our last page of notes on page 1. Remember that depending on the environment, certain adaptations will be good for that organism and others won't be. In the summary, you'll answer 3 questions. Question 1, describe how natural selection works. Question 2, how are genes and reproduction involved in natural selection? And question 3, what would happen if in a hog population, a hawk developed a trait for better eyesight? If you need a moment, you can pause the video now to answer the questions. So how does natural selection work? Well, the environment, remember, determines which traits are going to survive or be best. Genes and reproduction are related because if an organism has good genes, then they'll have a greater chance to reproduce and pass those genes on. And if a hawk had a trait for better eyesight, that hawk would probably have greater reproductive success, and eventually the hawk population might evolve to all have good eyesight. Okay, and your last part to do is to check for understanding. So write 2 questions that you think are good summary questions for this video.